In today's video, I'm carving a bunch of grapes. Basically, this is the second item in the in my project of making a bowl of food for my for as a decoration for my living room. The first step in the process for this one was to make a general shape. That is, the exact shape of this was not really meaningful and useful. I just wanted to make a something that made some sense for a bunch of grapes. And then once that shape is done, I'd be making spheres into this shape, basically. And to make the general shape, I started by removing the top and front of the bunch of grapes, layers by layers, following the lines. Then I removed from the lines I traced on the bottom the sides. And finally, I'd work on the head. This project went really well. The grapes weren't quite as regular as I would have liked them to be. I felt like I probably could have I don't know what I could have done. Basically, the reason it's not equal is that at the time I traced, I didn't care if they were equal or not, so that's a big thing. Of course, if I tried to make them equal, the result would have been much better. But also, the way I carved the spheres when I was at that point was not made the same way for the whole thing. For the first grapes I carved, I removed more material around the grape than I did for the last one. So the not the quality, but the method wasn't the same the whole time. So even if I had traced equal circles, it would not have ended with equal grapes. I'm talking about this now mainly because I don't have much else to say about this step of the process, and this was a fun little project. I didn't like that much the portion where I was carving the spheres. It was not that it was not fun, it was just not my favorite portion. It felt like I was scratching at the surface and barely doing anything. Yeah, like the change was visible, the change was constant, the progress was felt, but the the progress felt really slow compared to what I'm used to. Um, which, well, in art, that happens. There are boring and or slow parts. That's part of the deal. That's basically anything in life has slow parts. But this one in particular, I didn't like much. It was also a struggle while editing because the chips that were removed, the cuts that were made, were so small that it felt almost pointless to try to remove more. Not to remove more. The during the editing process for specifically the grapes, I cut out and removed a long stretches of time because the it felt redundant. So every few grapes I'd cut 4 more minutes and then started how that grape was cut, carved, and so on and so forth. I'd skipped 4 minutes every now and then. That way, it saved a lot of editing time, and also it removes some redundant portions. Like you've seen one grape being carved. You've seen all of them. Not exactly. Some are slightly different than others because of the way they're placed compared to the rest of the grapes. Like if the grapes are closer together than some others, if they are bigger, if they are smaller, if they are at the end or at the start, it's not exactly the same. So there is some value. So I left quite a lot of them, but I cut a lot more of them than those I left. Now here I have basically finished carving the sides and the top of the grapes. So now I start working on the head of the grapes. Basically here I traced a lot of lines with my knife, you may have noticed. These are mainly to serve as guides to to make sure that I leave enough materials for the stem to be correct. Um, because for this project, I wanted to have a well defined and really cartoonish stem, just two small branches from one branch. I had a very clear image of what I wanted it to be, and I had planned in consequence this time. Often for details, I tend to leave myself not enough room. I tend to carve far or too close to what I want. But this time, I really balanced well my expectations and my plan. I'm really happy with how the stem turned out. And here, while I was removing layer by layer for the top, I realized that it was much easier if I left myself a groove on the side that I trace the line, because that way the when I remove a layer, I only have one surface that I'm fighting against instead of two. It breaks the structure. It makes a weak point that's easier to deal with. So for the top, I did that basically the whole time. A tiny triangle or triangle groove on the one side, and then once it's deep enough, a few layers on the side. It went really well. That was a very enjoyable portion of the carving process. It felt like every cut was meaningful and useful, and I felt like I was really in control of the process right now. It felt really great, which is not always the case. Sometimes I feel like the cuts I'm making are kind of pointless, but these ones, each one felt purposeful because I understood why I was making them better. Like most time I go at this more instinctively. I just do what feels right without necessarily thinking about why it feels right. But this specific method, I tried purposefully, and it worked the way I thought it would work. So it was very satisfying to feel like I understood really what I was doing better than normal. Um, it felt like progress in my artistic abilities, let's say. So really glad about this part. Now I understand that this method cannot be used on every single surface because it's it was all because I was working with the direction I was working compared to the grain was made this method ideal. But I do understand that if I try to make this on the sides of the block of wood, it would not have worked nearly as well. So it's not a technique that can always be used, but now that I know when it can be used, and I'll be able to start using it more often, and take more control over my designs. The footage you're seeing is at I think 4 times speed. Yeah, 4 times speed. Mm, and that is the speed of most of the video. The only exceptions are tracing and painting that are closer to 6 times speed. I don't remember the exact number. I don't have it in front of me for those. Mm, and, I mostly base the speed of the time lapse with I watch I watch the footage while choosing the speed, and I make sure that there's no. I start it at the fastest speed I know that I can set it at sometimes, and then I just wait. I watch the video, and if there's a portion that I feel goes too fast and is maybe problematic uh, in terms of ability to have a video that makes sense, I slow it down uh, and go back and forth until I have a speed that I feel is as fast as I can make it without it being a problem. And well, for tracing, it takes a lot of speed for it to become a problem compared to knife work, because when removing wood with a knife, the knife can flash in the light. It can the wood itself is being turned around in all orientations, so it's easy for it to become the kind of flashing imagery that is problematic for some people, and I try to be mindful of that. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I'm trying. So here, I started by making one of the grapes to be a reference for the shape I was going to be making all other grapes afterwards, at the tip of the bunch of grapes. This was also to ensure that I had that it ended at a point that it ended with the grapes and not with the strange flat top or something between 3 or 4 grapes. And then here I am tracing all other grapes. And this I tried to make them randomly sized and randomly placed. It ended up, yeah, not as random. I do have my tendencies, and none of those are perfect circles. I'm certain of that. It's a I didn't try to make them perfect circles, so it's kind of a mess. And then I made one pass where I removed a bit of a layer on every single part that isn't a grape. The in between of each grape is removed slightly. This was mainly to make it so that I had a strong line. Like the pencil line can easily disappear into the noise after some time, but if I carve out around all of those lines, then those lines become immortal, so to speak, and also make for great um, weak points when trying to go deeper. So so it felt like a good idea. So the whole surface was removed in the first pass, and then later on the second pass, I'd make them much deeper and round out the edges um, of the grapes to make them somewhat spherical. And here it's pretty obvious that the size and type of chips, as I was saying, is very different. It's tiny, tiny little splinters that are removed at a time compared to the rest of the process. Big, flat planes of wood. Well, big. It's relative. It's all. Everything is relative, and it's. I'm not working with that big of block of wood, so it's a. As far as this block is concerned, big bits of wood, but it's just almost powdery wood at some points. It makes it also a bit more annoying to clean afterwards. That the chips are so small, they tend to cling to surface more and get a bit everywhere in the house. But that's the kind of chips that are always going to be made when there's a lot of detail work, so it's a necessary evil. Evil is a strong word. It's a but it's a strong word, but it's the correct expression. I don't know how else to phrase it. I like when my art has details, when my woodworking has details, but I don't really like doing the details, and I don't really like cleaning up after there are details. But the fact the finished piece is worth the um, slight per slight portion where I don't enjoy it as much as the rest. It's a balance that I'm willing to take part in. Let's say I have complex feelings about detail work. It's a boring portion, but it's the portion that really makes the piece stand out and feel more interesting on a shelf. Like if I only did the rough shape and then shaded in, painted all of the. I did shading and paint for making it look like it had 3D. Well, first I probably wouldn't have been able to do as good a job at that because I'm not that good at painting yet. But it would also have been much more boring of a finished product. The fact that it is physically and really detailed with actual geometry makes it much more interesting to me, at least, than if the details were just painted on. Because yes, I did paint this specific piece of wood. I'm probably going to be doing that with most of the food bowl, but I'm probably I just made a flat coloring. I didn't do any shading at all. I trusted the fact that it had complex-ish geometry to have natural shading when we just hold it in our hands. So but and flat painting is also the way I did with the carrot, the first part of the food bowl. But and I'm those the food items that I paint for this, if I paint them, will be with flat coloring. And I'm thinking most of my wood carvings will likely have flat coloring also, with just straight up colors right out of the bottles instead of me trying to mix and match and do fade ins and outs. Mostly because I don't want the painting of my piece to be a crutch to so that I stop trying to make details with wood. Like I want my wood carving projects to be mostly about the wood, about carving the wood and the technique of it. I don't want to limit myself by the fact that I'm better at painting than I am at wood carving. I mostly have just much more practice with painting than I have with wood carving from my studies and time. Of course, there's always going to be exceptions, but if I can make it without painting to if there's a detail that can be made without painting, I will make it without painting. That's the way I view it. It's there's always going to be exceptions, but that's the way I view things right now. Like, I won't be mad if I deviate from that for one or two projects, but in general, that is the plan. Don't paint for wood as much as possible. So here the process of the second layer has begun for a few grapes even. And basically the way I did that was that I rounded the edges of the grapes I'd traced, and then I'd carve inwards from the grape itself and the size of the grape, so that there's overhang under. Like, I wanted to make a groove under the grapes themselves, so that the grapes would be separate in a way from the rest of the surface. They'd really stand out a lot. I did that as deeply as I felt comfortable with, which is not that well. No, it's pretty deep. It's just no, it's very deep. For some of the grapes are really high up compared to the base, the deepest surface of the grape. But I had a finished product in my hand, and I'm trying to think of other comments that I might have about it. But I'm happy with the results. I think I could have done better, but for where I am in my abilities, uh, I'm still happy about it. And here I begin the carving of the stem. I tried to use basically the same type of technique I used for the top initially. It was harder because it was much a small portion and its details, so I didn't want it to break. Like, this is the kind of detail that traditionally breaks, and I don't have the kind of safety net that I had for the carrot. The carrot, it was leaves all around. It was more a so if one of the leaves broke, it wasn't going to be noticeable. But here, if one of the sides of the stem broke, then my stem will have only one tiny branch, and it would be much more boring. Uh, and it will also not fit with what I wanted initially. But I'm happy to report that nothing broke. It worked phenomenally from on the first try. So I'm really glad about that. I was a bit worried when I was rounding off the stem because it felt like it would. At some points in there, it really felt like it was going to be breaking, but it didn't. So really happy about that. And here I'm applying purple paint. Here, to paint the grapes, I started painting with the flattest side of the grapes because the idea was that while I was painting the rest of the body of the grapes, the underside would dry enough that I would be able to place it down for when I was going to be painting the stem. It didn't work perfectly. I'm going to have to be doing some touch-ups at places where the paint remained on the paper towel I used to at least somewhat try to protect a bit the surface of my table. The trouble here was mostly on painting the under the grapes because the way I carved it to make the grapes separate from the rest, I had to make grooves under the grapes as I mentioned earlier, but also meant that the said underside was harder to reach with a brush than than normally than it would normally be. So that's also most of the touch-ups I'm going to have to do. I had to do after the streams were over and the paint had dried. It's the other side of the grapes, the tiny spots I missed. And with that, I finished the project. Thank you very much for watching. Feel free to come by whenever you want. Bye.